Welcome to another edition of the Penn State Athletics Update, brought to you by Penn State Sports Night. I'm Cailey Thalman alongside Amanda Vogt. Our beat reporters have been out covering Penn State athletic events across multiple sports and are here to give you all updates. From the end of the hockey and basketball seasons to the start of baseball and softball, we've got you covered.
Last week, Penn State announced Mike Rhoades as Micah Shrewsbury's replacement as the head coach of the men's basketball team. A lot of changes upon the squad that made it to the NCAA Tournament for the first time since 2011. Our beat reporters Justin Ciavolella and Ethan Ellis attended Rhoades' introductory press conference and are here to break down the latest changes to the team.
Thanks, Amanda and Cailey. Penn State basketball launched itself into a new era of coaching last week at a press conference introducing former VCU head coach Mike Rhoades as the new Penn State coach. Both Justin Ciavolella and myself were on hand at the event. Here's how it all went down.
In an introductory press conference on Thursday, Penn State introduced their new head coach for their men's basketball program. Mike Rhoades, who had been the head coach at VCU since 2017, described his mentality going in.
We're going to recruit really hard. We're going to continue to build this program to compete at a level we all want to compete, and to do that, it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of making great decisions. It's a lot of investing in what you're trying to do.
This announcement comes in the aftermath of Micah Shrewsbury's departure after 2 seasons with the program to go to Notre Dame. While at VCU, Rhoades had a 129-61 record and took the Rams to the NCAA Tournament 3 times. He inherits a program with some roster gaps after the departure of many scholarship athletes this postseason, including Seth Lundy. Rhoades emphasized being aggressive, bold, and different on the court, as well as being aggressive when it comes to recruiting. Rhoades has strong connections in PA, which will ultimately help with recruiting.
We got to go build a roster, but I assure you this, we're going to do it right, and we're going to do it so we build this to last. That's very important.
The new coach was born and raised in Pennsylvania and attended college at Lebanon Valley.
I've known Penn State since I've been born. My dad used to drive us up here for a lot of different things. And I seen games in Rec Hall. I worked basketball camps here. My sister went here. My brother went here. My dad went to graduate school here. It's a cool place, number one. Who wouldn't want to be here?
Justin, Micah Shrewsbury took this program to heights it hadn't seen in years, and in some cases even decades. How was he able to make such an impact in the 2 years he was here?
Well, there's 2 things that Micah Shrewsbury and the rest of his staff did really well, and the first one is putting the trust in the players and those around him. Micah Shrewsbury on the court, you look at the guys that he had, like Seth Lundy, Jalen Pickett, Cam Winter, Andrew Funk. He always trusted those guys no matter how down they were in terms of stats or anything like that. The big thing I look at is this game against Rutgers, and I've mentioned it before. Seth Lundy was 1 of 16 shooting in that contest, but after the game, Shrewsbury was asked, why'd you let him keep shooting? Why didn't you put him on the bench? And Shrewsbury said, well, he's leading the Big Ten in three-point shooting. Why would I not trust my guy? And that trust and his ability to earn those relationships with his players and build those set him apart from what was at Penn State in the past. It helped develop that culture that he was looking for. And so that trust is the one thing he was able to do. The second thing is play to the strength of his players. You look at his first year in Happy Valley, they didn't have too much offensive, firepower, so they played more of a defensive brand. And, on the offensive end, they slowed down the pace of their game, which really frustrated opponents at times. But then the second year, he brought in guys from the transfer portal that not only fit the culture, but were able to change the way the game was played because of their strengths, not his strengths as a coach. So what did that end up leading to? Penn State completely revitalized their offense, rejuvenated it, ended up living and dying by the three-pointer, and that was the difference, was his ability to see the strengths of his players rather than himself as a coach and play to those strengths rather than his.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Placing trust in your players goes a long way in helping build their confidence, and that's definitely what Micah Shrewsbury did there. But moving on, we have the Penn State Nittany Lions have a new head coach in Mike Rhoades. What did you see in Rhoades' press conference that gives you confidence about his future here at Penn State?
Well, while we were at his press conference, Ethan, he said 3, possibly 4, maybe even 5 times, we're going to be bold, we're going to be different, and we're going to be aggressive. And that right off the bat is what this new Penn State regime has to do. And Mike Rhoades, he's been a coach that in the past his offenses are a little bit slower than especially what Penn State showed this year. You look at this past year at VCU, they averaged just 6.1 3-pointers per game compared to Penn State, who made over 10 a game. And then, they play more of a physical brand at VCU under Rhoades, where they were averaging 14 plus free throws a game compared to Penn State, who was still in single digits in free throws made per game. So you look at that change, that Penn State is now not going to be able to live and die from the 3-point range, and that bold, different and aggressive. I think he's going to change his coaching style a bit based off what we were able to gather at his press conference, and it's going to have to, start with that same strategy going into the recruiting trail, which we'll get to later on. But you look at one of the coaches he brought in, and former Nittany Lion Joe Crispin, who at Rowan University, Division III, that is, his teams over the last 6 years, 80 plus points per game, and over the last 2, 90 points per game. And you look at that and you go, well, that's the complete opposite of Mike Rhoades. So he's built a staff. Sure, he brought a ton of VCU coaches along with him, but at the same time, he brought in Crispin, who changes the dynamic. And now we really don't know what this Penn State team on the court is going to look like next year. And at the moment, the only thing we know is that he's going to establish a culture. He talked about building those relationships, and that's the prime focus for Penn State right now.
Well, and Rhoades is going to have a whole new team to shape with his culture, as Penn State has lost some of their top scorers in Jalen Pickett, Seth Lundy, and just today, Keba Jai went to the transfer portal. So what do you think is going to happen in terms of recruiting and just overall the future of this team?
Yeah, well, we'll start with these 4 guys right here: Seth Lundy, Andrew Funk, Jalen Pickett, Cam Winter, just some of the really big guys that helped Penn State make the run that they did this year into the round of 32 in the NCAA tournament, before that into the Big Ten championship game. And these are big losses. None of them will be returning to the Nittany Lions this season. And you just mentioned Keba Jai entering the transfer portal just today. And Penn State now left with just 2 players on their roster for next year in Nolan Collery and Demetrius Lilly, that is. And those two, together, right now that's all Penn State has. And those 2 were big factors in the 2022 recruiting class for Penn State, their highest rated program recruiting class in program history. Right now, that's all Penn State has. So we talk about the transfer portal, we talk about recruiting. There's one guy that I think it all starts with for Penn State, and that's going to be Ace Baldwin. He's a VCU player. He was the Atlantic 10 Player of the Year, averaged about 12 points per game, 5.8 assists per game. And look, those stats might not, stand out necessarily compared to Jalen Pickett or Seth Lundy, but he's the guy that I think gets the ball rolling for the Nittany Lions. I'd have to guess he might be one of the first, if not the first player that Mike Rhoades brings in with him. VCU had plenty of their own players enter the transfer portal as well, and I think he's the first domino to fall in the recruiting trail for Mike Rhoades now that he's in Happy Valley. And while we were at the press conference, we looked to our left and we saw a guy like Nolan Collery. He was there. Evan Mahaffey, he did enter the transfer portal along with Jameel Brown, but they were both there. So you have to wonder, has Mike Rhoades already started to establish some relationships, and maybe Mahaffey takes his name out, maybe Brown takes his name out, maybe Keba Jai went in today just testing the waters, maybe he'll be back too. We still have to see how this all plays out for Penn State, but the one thing is, Rhoades really hit on relationships. He has a relationship with Baldwin from the days at VCU, and I think Ace Baldwin, there's a few crystal balls out there that say he's coming to Penn State. I think he's going to be that first domino to fall in Mike Rhoades' new tenure with Penn State.
Well, Justin, you make some really good points, and Rhoades really does have some big shoes to fill in Micah Shrewsbury and basically has to establish a whole new team. The new era of PSU basketball certainly will be interesting to watch. Be sure to stick with Penn State Sports Night for updates on Nittany Lion basketball. For Justin Ciavolella, I'm Ethan Ellis. Now back to the desk.
It'll definitely be an adjustment considering the amount of players that will be leaving and not returning for next season. But in Rhoades' conference, he just exuded a lot of passion, and I'm excited to see what's in store for the team coming up next.
Absolutely, and props to Micah Shrewsbury for what he did for the team in the 2 seasons that he was here, but I'm very, very excited to see what Rhoades will do with the incoming players next season. Now let's take a look at Penn State men's hockey. The Nittany Lions defeated Michigan Tech soundly before falling to the University of Michigan in an overtime thriller, ending their phenomenal season. Beat reporters Anthony Desher and Kendall Skalicky are here to talk about what went down.
Thanks, guys. Last weekend, Penn State returned to the NCAA Tournament for the first time since 2018, looking to punch their ticket to the Frozen Four. The Nittany Lions dominated against Michigan Tech in the first round before they were knocked out by Michigan in overtime in the quarterfinals. We are here to break down the weekend for you and talk about projections for next season. So, Anthony, in Allentown, the Nittany Lions were lights out on Friday night, winning 8-0, but obviously had that heartbreaking loss on Sunday. What were your thoughts overall on the weekend?
Well, the last show we had, I stressed about Michigan Tech's really tough defense to crack, and I guess Penn State just completely ignored my points there because they put up an 8 spot on there. Liam Soulier looked fantastic, and it was a complete team effort. You saw the offense clicking with 15 points, 15 players registering a point, at least one of those, and the defense was there with obviously with the shutout, and like I said, Liam Soulier was great as well. But you go over to Game 2 in Michigan, obviously a very tough opponent, number 2 in the country going into this one. You see them get into penalty trouble, and that's the thing with Michigan. You never want to get into penalty trouble with them because, yes, Penn State had the lead with only 20 minutes to go, but Adam Fantilli had a close shot that he roofed it. I mean, only Adam Fantilli would, cash that one in. That's why he's a Hobie Baker candidate. But, they just really fell back on their heels against a really quick offense with the Michigan Wolverines. And it went into overtime, and it only took 52 seconds for Mackie Samoskevich to, get one past Liam Soulier and advance the Wolverines to the Frozen Four.
Yeah, definitely a tough way to end the season, but the Nittany Lions did end with a 22-16 record. What do you think was working well for the team this season? This was the best this season they've had in program history. So what was working, and what would you like to see improve for next year?
Well, like I said previously, Liam Soulier has just been, really good this season, even though the last half of the year wasn't really as successful as it was in the first half. Because in the first half, they were playing great in the offensive zone and in the defensive zone, but you kind of saw in the second half where the defensive play kind of toned down a little bit. That's why you saw them kind of fall behind in games and stuff like that. But I also want to see the power play improve. We say it every week how if the power play's going, there's a great chance that Penn State wins. If they scored a power play goal here and there, maybe you would see a couple more wins in that column. But just another thing I saw was just the high-end talent getting it done. Kevin Wall-Torlin and Connor McEachern coming away with over 20 points on the season, really top-heavy with the offense. And what I also want to see improve is the depth scoring. They were very off and on during the year. Sometimes you'll see them have multiple, the bottom 6 have multiple goals in a game. Sometimes they really just won't see any of them on the stat sheet. So if they can get that in check for next season, they could rebound after the tough loss against Michigan, try to get something springing forth for an even better season next year.
And the team's not going to look the same next year, as you said, losing 2 leading scorers, Kevin Wall and Torlinden, but they do have some great underclassmen coming back, as well as star goaltender Liam Soulier. So what are you envisioning this team to look like coming back next season?
Well, they're going to lose that high-end talent with all these seniors, as you see here. Some of them already getting deals with professional clubs, but the transfer portal is very active right now. You see movement all around, and if Penn State can, pick one of those guys up to replace one of them, they'll fill in some spots, plug and play here and there, but also the commits that Penn State have, they will also get a very good opportunity to come in and start playing right away with the amount of players that they're losing. And when it comes to overall success next year, yes, you're going to lose a lot of leaders in Paul DeNaples, the captain, who was just really, really vocal in the locker room, and Connor McEachern, who was also one of those vocal leaders, getting someone to replace them, stepping up in the locker room saying, hey, guys, we lost a lot of players and a lot of, friends and family here, but, we can still do it into this round, even though things might not be looking as, bright with all these players leaving.
They're definitely losing some great guys, but hopefully they can get some players back on the team, and we're going to have to wait and see what happens next season. Penn State started the season unranked, but made some adjustments along the way to prove that they are a top 10 team. They have some work to do on the offseason to fill key positions in their roster, but the future looks bright for this team. We'll just have to wait and see what next season brings. For Anthony Desher, I'm Kendall Skalicky. Cailey and Amanda, back to you.
Amanda, the Nittany Lions had a phenomenal season and played so well against Michigan Tech. Unfortunately, that did not carry through to their game against Michigan, but goaltender Liam Soulier truly played his heart out in that final game.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that one. The loss in overtime is definitely going to stick with this team throughout the offseason, but that's just the reality of the situation. It'll be interesting to see if they use it as a motivator, because that might be a great indicator for what they will do next season. Now let's shift over to the sports currently in season. Spring sports haven't been feeling spring temperatures, but softball hasn't stopped. The Nittany Lions just wrapped up a 3-game series in Minnesota where they lost 2 to the Golden Gophers. Overall, Big Ten play hasn't been too kind to the blue and white, but the team holds a strong 20-8 record. Our beat reporters Joey David and Allie Wenskoski are here to recap softball's latest efforts.
Thanks, Cailey and Amanda. Penn State softball opened up Big Ten play against Iowa and went 1-2 during those 3-game sets. So, Allie, there were a ton of ups and downs during that first 3-game series. What did you notice as Penn State opened up Big Ten play?
Yeah, so like you said, it was definitely not the matchup that Penn State wanted as they opened up Big Ten play, as they went 2-1 with Iowa. But they started off strong. They opened up on Friday with a 3-2 victory. Thrilling game, walk-off home run by Liana Jones in the bottom of the 7th to give Penn State the victory. There's no better story than that for Penn State. But then some rain showers came through on Saturday, postponed the second game of the series to Sunday, which meant doubleheader day on Sunday for Penn State and Iowa, where they fell in both games, actually. And it came down to the lack of defense. Their bats were there, and in fact, a few Penn State athletes actually had their first collegiate home run in the doubleheader, including Maddie Finnegan and Lydia Coleman. And then also we had a 3-run shot by Caitlin Morrison in the doubleheader, the first game on Sunday, but it wasn't enough for Penn State to prevail in the game against Iowa. They had some stars on offense. Sammy Diaz had a solo shot herself for the Hawkeyes, and then Nia Carter and Tatiana Roman were just stellar for Iowa and gave them both games of the doubleheader.
I couldn't agree more. It's great to see when a softball team gets the bats off their shoulders. Penn State's bats have been alive. They're continuing to be alive, and that's a big point of the game. I would really like to see a lot more of them laying out, getting dirty, and really trying to help out their pitcher and make some big plays to really switch the momentum. And if there was a little bit more of a momentum switch, Penn State could have came out with a sweep. But now we're going to look back into the most recent series that we had, which is Minnesota. So Penn State also had that game in a Friday and 2 games on a doubleheader on Sunday, splitting it 1-2. So what did you see in that game?
Like you said, they split the doubleheader on Sunday, but they lost the first one, not what Penn State wanted to do in this series either. So they started off by going on their first road trip for Big Ten play, not what they wanted. Lost the first game, but then no game on Saturday, just like the Iowa series. Doubleheader on Sunday. They lost the first game of the doubleheader 3-1. Just came down to pitching and lack of offense as well. But then they won the second game 2-0. Bailey Partial was on the mound, and she pitched a stellar game, complete game, her 10th complete game in Penn State history, and Penn State would take on the win.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And we have just great star players at the top of the Penn State lineup. You have Melody Combs, you have Emily Maddock, you have Caitlin Morrison, you have Lexi Black, and especially Bailey Partial in the circle. So each player brings a different aspect of the game that they excel in that complements the other and leads the team to success. Here's how these leaders have been assisting the roster this season.
Since opening up Big Ten play, Penn State softball hasn't been putting up numbers in the win column, but wins could be on the way if the Nittany Lions' stronger players continue to play their best version of the game against the competition still to come. Starting off with the first batter any opposing pitcher will have to face against the Nittany Lions, Melody Combs. Batting .324 on the season with an .839 OPS and a .420 on-base percentage, Combs has been a strong contact hitter. She currently sits 3rd on the roster in hits. Once the ball is put in play by the second baseman, don't blink. She's one of the fastest players on the team and has the ability to beat out infield grounders if she needs to. Going down to number 2 in the lineup, all the Nittany Lions need her to do is hit, and she is very good at that job. Emily Maddock. The designated player is hitting .500 on the year with a 1.101 OPS and an on-base percentage of .548. Not to mention, in her 38 at-bats, she has only struck out twice. In her last 23 at-bats, she has recorded 14 hits and is on a 7-game hitting streak. This is good enough for the longest hitting streak on the team currently. Rounding out these leaders at the plate, the centerpiece in the circle of this roster is pitcher Bailey Parshall. The graduate student has been lights out this season with a 1.36 ERA, a .67 WHIP, and 112 strikeouts, including her 100th in the opening game against Iowa. Parshall eats up most of the innings for the team, as she has thrown 104 2/3 innings this year, showing that when the lefty is on, there aren't many better players in college softball.
So, Allie, now we're going to fast forward into the future where Penn State will face Northwestern, and both teams have very similar records. The main difference being that Northwestern plays a lot better in the Big Ten than Penn State has this season. What do you expect from this upcoming series?
Yeah, so like you mentioned it, Penn State is staying on the road for about a 2-week stretch here, and they are going to face Northwestern this upcoming weekend, going to Chicago now. And it's going to be a bit of a tough matchup. Penn State is only 2-4 in conference play, and they are 20-8 overall, while Northwestern is 5-1 in conference play, and they are 20-9 overall. So similar overall, not similar in conference play. Going to be a bit of a tough matchup there.
Yeah, I'm excited to see really what happens with this matchup. It's going to be a really telltale sign of what happens between these teams, but now we're going to fast even more forward, where the Nittany Lions will finally return back to Beard Field and face the Ohio State Buckeyes. What do you expect from that matchup when we'll finally be back in Beard Field?
Yes, Penn State finally returns to their home field advantage, hopefully soon enough. And they're going to be looking to take this one against Ohio State. It's a big series, and it is a doubleheader as well next Tuesday, starting at 4:30 and 6 for Penn State and Ohio State. But Ohio State is a little closer in Penn State in conference play. They are 2-4 in the conference, just like Penn State, but they are 21-11 overall. So they've played a few more games than Penn State, a little extra experience. But they have quite some time before they go to Penn State. They are playing against Ohio University on Wednesday, and then they have a home series against Rutgers this weekend. So they will be coming off a 4-game home stretch. So they're going to have home field advantage then, but they will be heading to Beard Field for Penn State's return to Beard Field.
Penn State started off this season white hot, but has been cooling down since Big Ten play began. With their star players, they should start to see success in the coming games, as long as the Nittany Lions can stick to playing their style of ball. Back to you guys, Cailey and Amanda.
Well, the pitching staff all season for the Penn State has been something to watch. Bailey Parshall has so much control on the mound, and she just is always controlling the tempo of the entire game. Now, if Penn State can get their bats going at the same time as Parshall is dealing, that's going to be something that all opponents will have to watch out for, especially when they play at Beard Field.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, softball started out so hot this season before losing 4 games in a row before their win against Minnesota this weekend, which was must needed for them continuing with the rest of the season. Like softball, baseball has also struggled as of late. The team is 14-10 so far on the season, but lost all 3 games to the Michigan Wolverines in their series a week ago to open Big Ten play, and mustered just 1 win against Indiana this weekend at home in their 3-game series. With lots of baseball left to play and important Big Ten matchups ahead, let's hear from beat reporters Jacob Cheris and Logan Bourandas about the season so far and what the Nittany Lions need to do to be successful in the remainder of the year.
Thanks, Cailey. Penn State had a very interesting series against the Indiana Hoosiers. Let's take a look at Sunday's offensive affair. The Penn State Nittany Lions played their second Big Ten series against the Indiana Hoosiers. Sunday was the back half of a doubleheader, and it was filled with offense. It was a slow start for the Nittany Lions as they left 2 runners stranded through the first 2 innings. The Hoosiers capitalized big time on starting pitcher Carson Coles, getting out to an early 4-0 lead. However, Penn State showed some fight, climbing all the way back to take a 6-4 lead in the bottom of the 3rd. Kyle Hannon kicked things off with a 2-run homer to left, and Thomas Bramley followed up with a solo shot to center. After Bobby Marsh's RBI double, Josh Spiegel brought in 2 more runs with an RBI single. But that lead would not last long. The Hoosiers battled back to tie it at 4, and then this happened. Penn State's defense started to struggle, and the Hoosiers took advantage. A 3-run shot from Tyler Cerny gave Indiana a commanding 9-6 lead. They eventually took a 14-6 lead heading into the 7th inning. Despite a late 7th inning rally that had the Nittany Lions only trailing by 4 runs, manager Rob Cooper was not pleased by his team's performance in both games.
We got to do better, and they know that. I love them. And if you lose 1-0 or lose 22-11, it's the same.
The Hoosiers ended up winning 22-11, and Penn State dropped to 1-5 in conference play. I'm Jacob Cheris for Penn State Sports Night.
The Nittany Lions lost the series 2-1 and continue to struggle in conference play. So, Logan, what really stood out to you this weekend?
Well, we'll focus on the positive to start out. We'll get to the negative from the series later, but I want to focus on two really heroic performances out of the Penn State bullpen during this series, and one of them even netted Travis Lunsman a Big Ten Pitcher of the Week award, coming in relief after a really solid start from Jaden Henline during the one win in this series. And Lunsman went 4 innings, struck out a career-high 10 batters, and really kind of set the tone early for this Penn State team in that series. But things kind of started to unravel during the doubleheader during that game, during the doubleheader on Sunday. But we saw a really dynamic performance from Stephen Miller coming out of the bullpen after a slow start for Penn State on the day. But Stephen Miller really kind of controlled the damage in that game, pitched a 7 1/3 innings of shutout baseball, and it allowed Rob Cooper to kind of talk after that game and kind of said that he's someone that embodies a Penn Stater, kind of came in as a walk-on to open up his career, and has just been fighting throughout his entire career. He was even cut once, but then he was able to make the roster and made a really solid relief appearance, against Indiana, and in a doubleheader where your amount of arms kind of vary in terms of who's available for game one, who's available for game two. You also have to keep in mind they play on Tuesday as well. You don't know how many players they had available, so to keep it at just 2 arms for game one was really huge. It gave Penn State a fighting chance in that second game. They couldn't take advantage of it, of course, but it gave them a fighting chance, and it also helped them out for this Tuesday game against Bucknell. Kept as many arms as you can possibly have for that series.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, and hopefully for Miller's sake, he was great, but unfortunately the defense in that second game couldn't really bail him out. They gave up 22 runs. So moving on, so how can Penn State really bounce back against this upcoming series against Delaware State? They play Bucknell, like you said, but moving ahead to the bigger series, the 3-game series in Delaware State, how can they bounce back?
Well, Jacob, it's going to be a much-needed break for Penn State as they've struggled, the Nittany Lions have, to open up Big Ten Conference play. And this is a Delaware State team that's only won 6 games so far during this season and are coming off a series against Fairleigh Dickinson. Remember them, they were a March Madness school that upset the number 1 seed Purdue. They had 2 games where they scored 20 runs on offense. So this is a Delaware State team that struggled on the offensive side. So this is going to be a big chance for Penn State's pitching staff to kind of regroup for the Big Ten play down the road, as they can kind of restructure their pitching staff how they want to, kind of reorganize some things. Because we saw Jaden Henline get that start on Friday, did really well, but it was only his second start of the season, and he's been one of Penn State's better pitchers so far on the year, alongside Travis Lunsman, who both played in the same game, and that's probably something that Penn State will not look to have for the future, trying to spread out those arms, because that was something we kind of saw during the doubleheader. They just didn't have many arms ready. And they've tried a lot of things on Tuesday as well. Ben DeMel on both the first dollar dog nights of the Penn State season. He got the start, the redshirt freshman did, but he struggled in that last start against Pitt. Of course, Penn State did come away with the win, but he's someone they're trying to work around with. He had to play in the Indiana game as well in game 2. Didn't even record a single out, so that's another thing that Penn State kind of has to work on in terms of restructuring their pitching staff as a whole.
Yeah, definitely. And lastly, there's been a lot of guys that have stood out. Thomas Brantley hit a home run yesterday. Of course, Jay Harry's always terrific. But so who's one guy that has stood out to you so far in this early season?
Well, Jacob, I believe that man's already on our screen right there in Kyle Hannon. He's a guy that's really kind of come out of nowhere for this Penn State team. He's really kind of been that do-it-all guy because he's hitting the leadoff spot in the Penn State lineup. We talk about Thomas Bramley, who hit a home run in Game 2. That was a back-to-back shot followed by Kyle Hannon's home run earlier that inning, and that was his team-leading 6th home run as well. So he's really a 5-tool guy, probably as close as to one that Penn State has in their lineup, as he also leads the team in stolen bases, has stolen 15 out of a possible 17 stolen bases on the year, hitting around a 280 average as well. So he's really a kind of a 5-tool guy, not really too much of a flaw in terms of the game for Kyle Hannon, and you take a look at the impact he has on this dominant Penn State lineup. It allows the Nittany Lions to move Jay Harry down in the lineup, who was the leadoff guy last year, get to move him down from number 1 to number 3 and allow him to hit right in front of Johnny Piacentino, one of your team's better hitters. It just makes your lineup well-rounded overall as a whole, and it's all due to the early season success of Kyle Hannon.
Yeah, definitely. Hannon had a great game the other day. So far, having a really good season. So, should be an interesting season. Now, let's send it to Nolan Collery, Adrianna Gallucci, and Anna Licastro for some lacrosse highlights from this past weekend.
Thanks, Jacob and Logan. Lacrosse has been incredibly successful on Happy Valley this spring. With the end of the season growing near, both the men's and women's teams are looking to continue their strong seasons, and as decisions for postseason placement are on their way. My name is Nolan Collery, and I'm joined alongside fellow lacrosse beat reporters Anna Licastro and Adrianna Gallucci to discuss both lacrosse rosters in the Happy Valley. So let's start things off with the men's team. Maryland just lost to the Michigan Wolverines, which I don't think anyone was expecting, which means the Big Ten is open for anyone to take over. Starting with you, Anna, do you think this Penn State roster has what it takes to become the new top dogs?
Well, Nolan, before we even get into that, I'd like to personally thank lacrosse this past weekend for providing me with my very first sunburn of the year. Underneath all this concealer, there's just a world of hurt going on, so thank you for that. And also, Maryland, what happened? I mean, genuinely. Me personally, I know I was not expecting that outcome. I don't know if anyone recalls the Big Ten standings at the end of last season, but just in case you don't, Maryland finished 5-0 in the conference, and Michigan finished 0-5. But anyway, regardless of that, can Penn State take over the Big Ten? At this point, I genuinely don't see why not. Because other than Johns Hopkins and Rutgers, every other team so far is 1-1. So really anything could happen. Johns Hopkins currently is leading, obviously. They're 2-0, and Penn State's going up against them this coming Saturday. So that could potentially be a great opportunity to move up from third. And how are they going to do that? I think by, number one, taking control of every opportunity they have to gain control of the ball, like face-offs, which I know Adrianna is going to touch on a little bit more. And then also their scoring. The Trainer brothers, obviously, they've been just unstoppable working together. Matt Trainer especially, just been putting up goal after goal after goal. And it's not just those two either, it's their entire offense. And I know we've all seen firsthand just how quickly this Penn State team is able to score and just put up one goal right after the other, and how much that rattles and discourages any of their opponents. So I think that's definitely going to be a key point to their success moving forward.
I agree with you. I mean, at this point, the Big Ten is up for anybody's taking. Penn State 1-1 in conference play. I'm really looking forward to going to that Johns Hopkins game and being there for Penn State Sports Night. That's the one I had my eye set on right from the get-go. Very excited to be there. But enough talk about Johns Hopkins. Let's go back to Penn State. And yeah, I want to mention the face-off from the Fogo position. Head coach Jeff Tambroni uses Hudson Bone and Chase Mullins. He doesn't really have one set Fogo. He uses both of them, which I think is great. I think that's a way to cause a little bit of ruckus on the other team's bench to consistently move your Fogos around. And in the Ohio State game, the two of them went 15-4-27 combined on faceoffs, which is great for the both of them. Then not even with just the faceoffs, the depth of that bench. That Penn State bench had 9 out of the 17 goals from the Ohio State game, with Matt Costin, who came off the bench, having a hat trick alongside the Trainer brothers. That's incredible. So it's not just the guys that you're putting out there to start on the field, it's the guys you can rely on from the bench too. And with that much depth on the Penn State roster, I see the Big Ten wide open for them.
I agree with you guys both completely, and I have to say, faceoffs will be the key. If Penn State can win over half of their faceoffs the rest of the season, I see no reason why they can't be the number one team. So let's move on to the women's team. Last year, they finished with a 6-9 record and currently sit at 10-3 with 3 games left to play. I mean, complete turnaround. We're going to start with you this time, Adrianna. What has allowed this team to be so dominant all year?
There's one thing that I've been saying every time I'm on the show, and it's defense, defense, defense. And this is the big key for the women's team's success so far. Sammy Dupac leads the team in ground balls and caused turnovers. She's also second in the Big Ten in ground balls. That's huge. Being able to play aggressively when you're on defense, being able to make those quick turnovers and get the ball downfield. But also getting the ball downfield is involved in the draw control. Kayla Abernathy leading that team with 58 draw controls, being able to get the ball quick down in your own offensive zone and setting up players like Gretchen Gilmore and Kristen O'Neill for those big time goals. That's huge for the women's squad.
Yeah, Adrianna, I absolutely love how much credit you give to defense because they really are just the unsung heroes of not only lacrosse, but basically almost every sport.
Yeah.
Like you said, Sammy Dupac just never letting her team down. Since you covered that so well, just to cover the other end of the field, Kristen O'Neill, we can't stop talking about her. She won't let us. She's still at the top of the stats chart. She has 41 goals now this season. She has just made herself absolutely indispensable, especially since scoring was a problem at multiple points during their 2022 season. So it's actually just been awesome to see her kind of be like the driving force in turning that whole thing around.
100%. Now, all season, we've been talking about a lot of big-time players for both rosters, and we are coming to that point where it's time for people to step up, but let's kind of have a retrospective moment. I'll start with you, Anna. Who is your overall, both men's and women's, Penn State lacrosse MVP thus far?
Well, I already talked about my girl Kristen O'Neill, so I'm going to have to give this one to Mr. TJ Malone. He is back this year after missing his entire senior season due to injury. His teammates and his coach are both so excited to have his skill and his leadership back on the team. And we talk about goal scorers all the time, and he is a goal scorer by every means. He has 20 goals so far this season. But in addition to that, a lot of his teammates' goals as well would not be possible without him. He's leading his team in assists. He has 19 so far this season. And it's just amazing to see a player that can not only put up their own shots, but also create that many offensive opportunities for the rest of their team. I think everybody needs a player like that.
TJ Malone is a great story. I remember one of the first games we worked at Panzer being able to do the press conference after TJ Malone coming out. And you could just see the passion that he has for the sport of lacrosse. So he's incredible. But since you mentioned somebody on the men's team, I want to kick it back to my girls on the women's team. And I'm pulling out with Gretchen Gilmore. Gretchen Gilmore is her right now. She's second behind Kristen O'Neill in goals. And she was also named the Big Ten Co-Offensive Player of the Week, alongside the IL/IWLCA Co-Offensive Player of the Week. She's absolutely nasty on the field. She's a great goal scorer. She's great on offense. And I'm just so glad that I'm able to watch her play. She's amazing.
What I really like about these picks, it feels like both teams have some super easy picks, but you guys went with people who underappreciated, somewhat under the radar. Stat sheet doesn't always show. I mean, of course, the assist numbers are there, but it's really important to give credit because it is a team sport by every mean. Both teams have just a handful of games left with major impacts on their final ratings on the line. The women's team will travel to Ann Arbor to take on the Wolverines on Saturday, and the men's team will play host to Johns Hopkins. Be sure to keep up with Penn State Sports Night for all the Penn State lacrosse coverage you need. For Anna Licastro and Adrianna Gallucci, I'm Nolan Collery. Now, let's take a look at the recent top plays here on the Penn State Sports Night Athletics Update.
It's been a great week in Penn State athletics. Softball, baseball, and men's and women's lacrosse all have lots of their seasons left to play, and we'll be bringing you coverage of all the action.
That's all for the 4th edition of the Penn State Athletics Update, brought to you by Penn State Sports Night. With another busy schedule upon us, be sure to comment which Penn State sports you're most excited to watch. For all of our beat reporters and our entire crew, joined alongside Cailey Thalman, I'm Amanda Vogt. Thank you for tuning in to Penn State Sports Night and have a great night.
Hey everybody, thank you for tuning into this edition of Penn State Sports Night. We hope you liked that segment.
And we're sure there's other Penn State Sports Night segments that you are going to love as well. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content.
And check us out on social media for updates and behind the scenes clips and pics. Follow us on Twitter at PSSN TV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with all the action.
For all of us here at the Belisari Media Center, we are
Penn State Sports Night.